Houghton family, members of the diplomatic corps, faculty, students, alumni, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Georgetown University Law Center. Today is a special day for us as we gather to announce a milestone in the life of the school, a new body that will embody this school's commitment to the importance of the rule of law around the world. I'm delighted to be able to report that this new Center for International Law will be named in honor of Eric Houghton. For those of you who are here for the first time, I'd like to mention three distinctive qualities of this law center. This is first a school committed to excellence, to education in its fullest sense. We prepare graduates who not only know the law, but have a sense of its philosophic and ethical dimensions, a curiosity about its nature and purposes, a sense of responsibility for its development and direction. We are fortunate to have both the largest full-time faculty in the nation and one of its most distinguished. The women and men of this law faculty are known for their commitment to the highest standards of scholarly inquiry, as well as for educating students who are innovators and problem solvers, who can operate effectively beyond our national borders, communicating with people of all legal traditions. Secondly, this is a very inclusive community. We're known for the diversity of the people who constitute our faculty, our staff, our student body, as well as for the diversity of ideas that energize our teaching and scholarship. This year's entering class includes 4 Peace Corps volunteers, a nuclear submarine officer, 3 Rhodes Scholars, 33 varsity athletes, a ballroom dance teacher, and the chess champion of San Diego. There are also students from more than 44 countries around the globe in our student body this year. Third, this is a school dedicated to educating leaders who will live generously in service to others. For more than 130 years, we have provided an education that nurtures not only the intellect, but addresses the whole person, reinforces a sense of responsibility for society and the needs of others. Our clinical programs, widely considered the best in the nation, provide thousands of hours of free legal services each year to persons in need here in Washington and beyond. Academic excellence, diversity of people and ideas, a commitment to service. There are other great law schools in the nation who are known for 1 or 2 of these qualities, but Georgetown is unique in its blend of all 3. On behalf of our students, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends, let me say, Mr. President, how pleased we are that you are here with us today. Indeed, it's a privilege for me to share the stage with all 3 of these accomplished men. Each has chosen a different path for service, but they have many things in common. First, each is a graduate of Georgetown University. They are also united by their personal commitments to service and to working to promote peace around the world. And now it's my honor to introduce to you the president of our university. Father Leo O'Donovan is a man who excels in many things. He's an acknowledged academic leader, a devoted priest, an admired scholar, and a dedicated teacher. Father O'Donovan.
Thank you, Dean Areen, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. This is indeed an auspicious day for Georgetown University Law Center, and indeed for our university as a whole. I'm delighted that so many colleagues, students, friends, and distinguished guests have gathered here to celebrate. We are especially honored to have with us today, of course, the President of the United States, our own 1968 graduate of the School of Foreign Service. Welcome again, Mr. President. We come together to celebrate a remarkably generous gift to Georgetown University Law Center, to pay tribute to an extraordinary friend and alumnus, and to reflect on the significant ways in which that benefactor's vision will enable Georgetown to further its service to the nation and to the world. As we envision the promise that the Eric Houghton International Law Center holds for Georgetown's third century of service, we recall that, like the Society of Jesus, Georgetown University has been an institution of international character since its founding in 1789. In the early days of the Jesuits, Ignatius and his followers founded schools all over Europe, schools linked in their educational philosophy, but attentive to local culture and circumstances. Those schools soon reached as far as India, China, and later the Americas. When George Washington brought his two nephews to Georgetown College in 1797, our catalog was already published in French and Spanish as well as English. Georgetown, in its first decades of operation, enrolled numerous students from Central America, South America, and Europe. Together, international students constituted nearly 1/5 of Georgetown's student population during those early years. This cosmopolitan character was fitting for a place of learning founded by John Carroll. Though himself born in the United States, Carroll, when consecrated the first United States Catholic bishop in 1790, oversaw parishes largely populated, of course, by immigrants. Almost all of his clergy were likewise immigrants. The Catholic community gathered around him was a collectivity of international groups, mostly English, but also German, French, and Irish. And so, at the same time his academy was becoming the first Catholic college in the United States, Carroll was struggling to build an American Catholic church that would embrace and be enriched by the cultural traditions of those constituting it. Today, we likewise bring together scholars, teachers, and students from around the world to live and learn together in a way that produces remarkable synergy and remarkable personal and educational benefits. As John Carroll labored to build a sense of common ground and unity among the various traditions reflected in the citizenry of the new republic, we strive to contribute to the building of a sense of shared purpose and mutual respect among today's global community. Essential to fulfilling this aspiration is, of course, educating students who will be citizens not only of their respective nations and states, but also of the world. Young men and women prepared to take their place in the global environment of the 21st century. Our commitment to global education is clear in our curriculum and in the scholarship of our faculty. Georgetown College's Faculty of Language and Linguistics, the McDonough School of Business's emphasis on the global business environment, and the Walsh School of Foreign Service with its centers for German and European studies, Muslim Christian understanding, and contemporary Arab studies all play a defining role in our international character. In recent years, the Law Center has emerged as a great leader in international law in its various dimensions, which include environmental law, finance, human rights law, trade law, and communications law. Georgetown's international law program will be bolstered immeasurably by Eric's generosity. We are deeply proud that Georgetown will be home to the Eric Houghton International Law Building, which both furthers Georgetown's ability to contribute to shaping a more peaceful and just human community and recognizes Eric's own remarkable work towards that same indispensable end. Eric Houghton has taken seriously and advanced admirably his family's tradition of service to society. His grandfather, Sir Robert, built a considerable fortune and with his son Edward employed it to benefit others, promoting causes of liberty and human rights. Eric himself has worked to provide low-cost housing in Hong Kong and to assist underprivileged Chinese students in pursuing college educations and professional training. He has negotiated the release of a famed physicist. He is now deeply involved in charting East Timor's course back to peace and prosperity. His wife, Patricia, shares his commitment to building a more just society. Indeed, the vessel which Eric has deployed as a mercy ship to assist East Timor has been christened the Patricia Ann Houghton. A 1951 graduate of Georgetown College, a former member of the university's board of directors, and the father of 5 Georgetown graduates, Eric lives and works, as we urge all of our students to do, ad maiorem Dei gloriam inque hominum salutem, for the greater glory of God and the well-being of humankind. In recognition of his leadership in the international arena, as well as his leadership at Georgetown, the university had the privilege of awarding him an honorary degree in 1986, and I had the privilege of extending our honors by granting him the John Carroll Award in 1997. As the Archbishop of Manila noted at Eric's investiture as a Knight of the Pontifical Order of St. Sylvester in 1984, Eric has dedicated himself to breaking down the walls of division and building bridges of understanding between nations. His new commitment to further international law education and scholarship is yet another way in which he is breaking down walls and building bridges. Of course, that is a common theme on the podium this morning. During his 2 terms in office, President Clinton has worked in remarkable ways to build a more peaceful and just human community. In his 2 terms as president, he has advanced peace in Northern Ireland and the Middle East, has taken a strong stand to end ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, has helped to end violence and to protect democracy in East Timor, has fostered a more constructive relationship with Asia, has strengthened cooperation throughout Asia, has helped African nations in their transition to democracy, and has pressed for the flourishing of human rights and freedom around the globe. Leadership of this caliber is exactly what Father Edmund Walsh might have hoped for when he urged the establishment of the School of Foreign Service in 1919 to ensure that the United States met as fully as possible the responsibilities that came with its emergence on the international stage after World War I. We look forward very much to the President's address and his reflections on international affairs in the new century, which he will offer shortly. First, though, it is my great pleasure to introduce Eric Houghton.
Thank you, Father. Huh? Break a leg? Mr. President, Father O'Donovan, Dean Areen, venerable teachers and faculty, alumni, ladies and gentlemen, it is always a pleasure to be with fellow graduates of Georgetown University. That distinguished members of the faculty and administration, I am honored and humbled to be in such company. I'm also greatly honored today in that the President has seen fit to set aside the affairs of state to be with us. We certainly owe him a vote of thanks for what he's done for American prosperity and also his humanity in releasing the oil from strategic reserves. I hope you all join me in wishing him a continued succession as leadership of the West and I forgot what I was going to say. Leadership of the West, and that he continues in his path of success. Thank you very much. Being with the extended Georgetown family prompts many memories, particularly of how I got to Georgetown in the first place. As some of you know, I had not wanted to come at all. I was quite happy in Shanghai carrying on the way I had through most of my adolescence. I was academically unambitious and spent most of my nights, Shanghai nights, in pursuit of worldly gestures and pleasures. Under Japanese occupation, that meant violating the curfew, as I regularly did. This was a perilous pastime. Today brings back the memory of our parting with my father. Well, my friends and I were engaged in what we called liberating enemy property. This could be lucrative, but dangerous. Our masters, the Japanese, had their own droll habits. If they found you on the streets after the midnight curfew, they usually dragged you off to Bridge House, the notorious center of the Kempintai, or secret police, where offenders would be worked on, and delinquents like myself were sometimes beheaded, depending on their whims. My father apprehended the danger and adroitly arranged for me to be shanghaied to Washington. Today brings back the memory of our parting. We are on the sidewalk where a taxi had deposited us, outside the student's nurse's home, a steamer trunk standing between us, and he said, "Well, you're here for the next 4 years, but you better work or they'll chuck you out." He continued, "Your mother advises me that you have a mind." My advice to you is to find it and fill it. With that, he left. I had a meager allowance of $10 a week, payable monthly, which inevitably vanished in one night at the Rainbow Room. I wonder, are there any devotees of that water hole, whether it still exists? Meanwhile, my new academic masters commenced a relentless bombardment on that Morrissey swamp that I called a brain. Their ammunition included such subjects as logic, epistemology, ontology, cosmology, psychology, 1, 2, and ethics, and theology. Little by little, certain principles were inculcated in what passed for my soul and were incidentally lodged in my head. And those principles had to do with honor, integrity, and a devotion to goodness and truth. All this drove me to the brink of dementia. To the utter indifference of the Jesuits, who were unfazed by my complaints, and God bless them. My studies, you see, had no allure for me. My idea of a good afternoon was to sit with a quart of beer on the banks of the Potomac, after cutting a few classes, listening to a local band playing "I'm Looking Over a Four-Leaf Clover," "Underneath the Arches," or my favorite, "Shantytown." In my final year, this could not continue. In my final year, it was touch and go whether I would make it. Fear gripped me. I could not imagine what my father's reaction would be. It was with a great sign of relief, and after stupendous effort on my part, that I managed to receive the resounding grade of C-. My teachers were even more relieved. I left Georgetown swearing to myself that never again would I darken her portals. But the years passed. I had married and had a small family. The chip on my shoulder had been knocked off, and I was persuaded to return to Georgetown for a seminar in 1975. It was then that the magic of Georgetown, in all its beauty and intensity, wove itself into my being. I found myself agreeing to a position on the board with that volcanic personality and cornerstone of modern Georgetown, Tim Healy. I enjoyed working with him and sometimes disagreeing with him. For example, Georgetown had accepted a considerable donation from Libya's Muammar Gaddafi. Shortly hereafter, Gaddafi and his lot embarked on a reign of international terrorism. I advised Tim Healy to refund Gaddafi's money with interest, which he ultimately did. He complained about the interest, though. With great courage, returning the funds personally. The despot's modus operandi was at odds with the school's Christian ethics. It is such honorable comportment for which Georgetown University is famous that sadly seems to be lacking or absent from the souls and minds of some of the members of the bar today. I mention this because the learning of law and the practice of it should be a noble profession, characterized by the utmost integrity. On the law and those who practice it depends democracy. It is the bedrock of our civilization. It is to the law that humble people turn when seeking equity, and it is to the law that oppressed people turn when seeking justice. Lawyers frequently feel they are made scapegoats for flaw in society that have many causes having nothing to do with their profession. And to an extent, this is true, depending on the standard of our morals, intellectual and otherwise. But lawyers of the court, officers of the court by tradition, should be held to high standards. Like the true casuist, and like the honorable sophist of yore, lawyers must hew to integrity of principle, must be honorable, must not abuse the law to seek riches, fame, or unfair political advantage. Georgetown University is an institution at which these values can take on new life. My wise father plucked me out of the stews and hedonistic corruption of Shanghai so that my mind might be trained at Georgetown and my spirit chastised and corrected. I trust that the same fidelity to value reigns in the Georgetown University Law School, and it will turn out not only brilliant practitioners of the law, but men and women of chastised and corrected spirit, people of honor and integrity. Today, as we cross the threshold into the 21st century and contemplate those students who will come here seeking higher learning, we naturally wish that they will carry back to their many lands and cultures the majesty, the beauty of the law that they have learned here. Our work will have been well rewarded, and we will have left an imprint on the sands of time. Thank you. Okay. You want me to fall off?
Thank you very much, Eric. As you can imagine, a slightly edited version of Eric's remarks will soon be posted on the website for our admissions office. The editing committee will meet over here afterward. It's now my great honor to introduce our own other Hoya, the President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. Father O'Donovan, thank you for giving me another chance to come back to Georgetown and for your extraordinary leadership over these many years. And Dean Areen, thank you for giving me a chance to come to the law school. I have to tell you that when they told me I was coming into the moot courtroom, my mind raced back 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, when we were in law school at Yale. Hillary and I entered the moot court competition. And it was sort of like the Olympics. There were all these trial runs you had to get through. and then you got into the finals, and you got to go for the gold. So we finished first and second in the trial runs, and then we got into the finals. And the judge, the moot court judge, was Justice Abe Fortas. You got to understand, this was the early 70s. It was a sort of irreverent time. Fashion was not the best. Some of us made it worse. And anyway, I had a bad day. Hillary had a good day. I thought she should have won. But Justice Fortas thought that her very 70s outfit, which was blue and bright orange suede, was a little out of order for a trial. And so he gave the award to a third person, who is now a distinguished trial lawyer in Chicago. And for his trouble, he has had the burden of contributing to all my campaigns and now to hers. So I suppose it all worked out for the best. Mr. Houghton, Mrs. Houghton, I thank you for your generosity. I loved your speech. And I'd like to thank you especially for what you've tried to do for the people of East Timor. It means a lot to me because I know how important it is to the future of freedom throughout Southeast Asia, and indeed throughout all East Asia, that we come to recognize that human rights are not some Western concept imposed upon the rest of the world, but truly are universal, as the United Nations Declaration says. East Timor is a small place a long way from here that many people thought the United States should not care about. And the fact that you did and continue to care about them and the enormous odds they have to cope with still is, I think, a very noble thing, and I thank you very much for that. I'd like to thank the faculty and staff and students who are here, and all the members of my administration and administrations past who are here, and my friends from Georgetown days who are here. Georgetown Law School has given more talent to this administration than any other single institution in America. And I'm almost afraid to mention some for Phil that I will ignore others or omit them anyway. But among the people in the administration who are Georgetown law grads are my Chief of Staff, John Podesta, my White House counsel, Beth Nolan, my Deputy Counsel, Bruce Lindsay, former White House Counsel, Jack Quinn, Budget Director, Jack Lew, former Trade Ambassador and Commerce Secretary, Mickey Cantor, Counselor to the Chief of Staff, Michelle Ballantyne, Deputy Communications Director, Stephanie Cutter. They're all graduates of Georgetown Law. Then I've had various ambassadors and other appointees, and Lord knows who else you gave me, so I'm grateful for that. It's also quite interesting to me that Beth Nolan's assistant, Ben Adams, and my personal aide, Doug Band, are actually working full-time at the White House. In Doug's case, he's working around the clock because we're traveling and we're working. We haven't slept in 3 weeks. And they're enrolled right now in Georgetown Law. Now, therefore, I would like to make a modest suggestion, Dean, and that is that when they take their exams in December, they be judged not only on the basis of legal reasoning, but creative writing. I also want to credit one other person for the remarkable fidelity Georgetown students and Georgetown lawyers have had to public service over the years. My freshman philosophy teacher, Father Otto Hintz, used to say that the Jesuits are convinced there was only one serious scriptural omission from the first chapter of Genesis. God created politics, and God saw that it was good. You'd get quite an argument, I think, from some people on that. But Georgetown has always been there for America's body politic, and we are a better nation because of it. The Eric Houghton International Law Center building will house work that will, in no small measure, shape the kind of nation we are and the kind of world we live in the 21st century. The 20th century raised a lot of questions of lasting concerns, of ethnic and religious conflict, of the uses and abuses of science, technology, and organization, and of the relationship between science and economic activity and the environment. But the 20th century resolved one big question, I believe, conclusively. Humanity's best hope for a future of peace and prosperity lies in free people in free market democracies governed by the rule of law. What Harry Truman said after World War II is even more true today. He said, "We are in the position now of making the world safe for democracy if we don't crawl in the shell and act selfish and foolish." Sometimes his unvarnished rhetoric was more effective than more strained eloquence. We are today in a position to make the world more free and prosperous if we don't crawl in the shell and act selfish and foolish. The scope of the challenge is quite large. In the 1990s, more people won their freedom than ever before in human history. People in nations like Russia, Ukraine, Nigeria, Indonesia now elect their own leaders. But it is just a first step. Without a strong and independent judiciary, civil society, transparent governance, and a free press to hold leaders accountable, the world's new democracies easily could sink under the weight of corruption, inequity, and poor governance. I read an op-ed piece by the New York Times columnist Tom Friedman a few months ago, which captured the experience I've had in this job for nearly 8 years now, when he said, "Americans were born as a nation skeptical of government. Our Constitution was designed to limit government. And then we had a decade when we were told by all of our politicians how bad government is. But the truth is that in many parts of the world today, human freedom is limited by weak and ineffective government without the capacity to deliver the goods, honor the rule of law, and provide a transparent environment so that investment can come in to lift the lives of people. Without democratic elections, laws can too easily be a tool of oppression, not an instrument of justice. But without the rule of law, elections simply offer a choice of dictators. Building a rule of law is hard work. If you just look at our own history, you get perhaps the most persuasive illustration. We established our right to elect our leaders before independence. Even with independence, we still, in 1776, had no national executive, no system of courts, only a weak legislature. The Articles of Confederation came 5 years after independence, but failed. The Constitution was ratified 13 years after independence and was quickly amended. And it was not until Marbury versus Madison in 1803, 27 years after the Declaration of Independence, that the courts established their rights to check the power of elected leaders. Of course, when we started, only white male property owners could vote. It wasn't until the end of the Civil War that African Americans were treated as citizens. Women didn't gain the right to vote until the 20th century. We are still very much a work in progress. And we need to take that humbling thought into account when we give advice to others in building their future. When the Soviet Union collapsed, it had no laws relating to private property or public elections or freedom of the press. In 1993, we launched a Rule of Law project that helped Russia draft a new civil code, a criminal code, a tax code, and bankruptcy laws. We also helped Russia to separate its judicial system from the executive branch, train judges in commercial law, support Russian law schools. It was not a panacea, but it did help to create the foundations on which Russia can build. The same need for stronger legal institutions is apparent in China, especially because of its impending entry into the World Trade Organization, which, as all of you know, I think is a very, very good thing. It's more than an economic opportunity because it can set China on a course that will diminish the role of government in its economy and its people's lives, while involving China into an international system of rules and responsibilities and mutual interdependence. China will have to make fundamental changes to meet its WTO obligations, restructure its industries, publish laws that have long been secret, establish procedures for settling disputes, create a level playing field for foreign firms. China has asked us for help in developing its legal expertise and legal system. We should provide it. And I expect Georgetown will be part of that effort. This past summer, Professor James Feinerman and Professor John Jackson and other Georgetown faculty met with some 25 senior government officials in China, from China, to advise them on structural reforms they will be making as they become fully participating members in the World Trade Organization. Since a Georgetown law professor helped Germany draft its democratic articles of government after the Second World War, Georgetown law professors have been active the world over, helping nations to establish democratic legal structures, from Estonia to Mexico, from South Africa to Mongolia. Next summer, you will begin an international judicial educational and exchange program to allow judges from other countries to come here to discuss with United States judges how to build a judiciary that is both independent and competent. These efforts illustrate how America's experience should be put to use to advance the rule of law where democracy's roots are looking for room and strength to grow. But in many parts of the world, people still struggle just to plant the seeds of democracy. For the last decade, one of the most important and gripping such places has been the former Yugoslavia. 8 years ago, the region was engulfed by war caused by Mr. Milosevic's desire to build a greater Serbia. It's easy to forget how very close he came to succeeding. If he had, it would have led to a permanent humanitarian tragedy and an end to the vision of an undivided democratic Europe. But with our allies, we stood against ethnic cleansing and stood by democratic forces fighting for change. From Sarajevo to Pristina, the carnage has ended. Croatia is a democracy. Bosnians are now waging their battles at the ballot box. The control of Milosevic and his dictatorship is now limited to Serbia. And this weekend, it appears, because of brave people casting their ballots, he has lost the last vestige of legitimacy. The OSCE and the EU have concluded that this election was marred by widespread irregularities. Experienced international observers were prevented from monitoring the election. But still, the people of Serbia showed up in overwhelming numbers. And despite the government's attempts to manipulate the vote, it does seem clear that the people have voted for change. And the question is, will the government listen and respond? I do not underestimate Mr. Milosevic's desire to cling to power at the expense of the people and its future. Indeed, the opposition candidate also disagreed with our policy in Kosovo. I am under no illusions that a new government in Serbia would automatically lead to a rapprochement between the two of us, and any new leader of Serbia should pursue first and foremost the interest of its own people. But if the will of the people is respected, the doors to Europe and the world will be open again to Serbia. We will take steps with our allies to lift economic sanctions, and the people of Serbia who have suffered so much finally will have a chance to lead normal lives. I hope that day is arriving, and when it does, people of goodwill will around the world help the people of Serbia to build and strengthen the institutions of a free market democracy. Some of you in this room will be needed in that effort. The persistence of people with your expertise, the institutions of our country, especially the Georgetown Law Center, will make an enormous difference in the future. Let me close with just one very personal thought. The law gives people a way to live together, to resolve their differences, to be rewarded when they should and punished when they're particularly destructive. But the idea is it embodies our most fundamental values and applies it to practical circumstances so that even when we have differences, we find a way to abide a decision that is made. It will be more and more important in the years ahead because the world is growing more interdependent. It embodies the idea, just because there are rules, that all of us are created equal, and that we should be treated blindly without regard to our race, our religion, our ethnicity, our condition of ability or disability, whether we're straight or gay, whether we're Asian or European or African or Latin American. The whole idea of the American law, embodied in the ideals of our Constitution and continuously perfected, is that we are all equal and that we are growing more interdependent. If we were completely independent, we'd have no need for law. We'd just be out there doing our own thing. And if we weren't equal in the eyes of the law would be a monster and an instrument of oppression. So the law is our society's attempt to reconcile our deep belief in independence and our understanding that interdependence is what enables us to make progress and to give our lives more meaning. The world is more interdependent than ever before. If we can find a way for people to believe that through the law we can create an environment in which everybody is better off, in which no group or individual is seeking to make unfair gains at anyone else's expense, then the world's most peaceful and prosperous and exciting time lies ahead. Then I'm not worried about what use we will make of the marvelous mysteries of the human genome. I'm not worried about whether some nation will abuse what they find out in the deepest depths of the ocean or the black holes of outer space. I'm not even worried about our ability somehow to find a way to deal with the terrorists and their ability to use the marvels of new technology for biological, chemical, and other weapons. We'll deal with it fine, as long as we remain committed to the integrity of the individual, but the interdependence within and beyond our borders. Or to go back to Mr. Truman's words, if we're not too stupid and too selfish, the best is still out there, and the law will lead us. Thank you very much. Thank you.